Welcome back to another Redstone tutorial here on the channel, and before we get into it, I would just like to say that I did forget about the target block in my last Redstone tutorial. So quickly, we'll go over that. The target block will redirect redstone into it, which is very handy for tight circuits, and if you shoot it with a bow or a crossbow, it will give off a redstone signal based on how close to the center of the target you hit. And to clarify something, I said in my video that the pistons can push up to 13, and in my mind I'm thinking, they cannot push 13, but it's just the way my brain was working. So I flick the lever here, it will push 12, bring it back, get those pushed back over. We push this block down there, that'd be 13 blocks. It cannot push the 13 blocks. So 13 is where the pistons stop pushing. That's what I meant. I probably was not very clear with that. So if it was confusing, that's what I meant. But without further ado, let's get into the video, which is, as you can probably tell from the title, redstone circuits that you should know. The first circuit we're going to take a look at here is the T flip-flop. Now, in its basic form, a T flip-flop takes a single pulse from like a button and turns it into a constant pulse, effectively turning a button into a lever. So this can be done in a variety of different ways. We just have a comparator reading the output of this copper bulb, and we can see that it stays on or it stays off depending on the position of the bulb itself. So it's really simple, and you can even put it behind the wall. So if you don't want the copper bulb showing, no problem, just throw a block in between, copper bulb, redstone comparator, and then you still have a T flip-flop. There are other methods to do this, but this one is by far the most compact, I believe. I could be wrong, but this seems pretty darn compact. The uses for this are apparent when we have things like a door that we want to open, but we want to be able to shut it from the other side. If this button was replaced with a lever, and we say opened it from this side, and it was still powered from that side via a lever, we could not power it from this side to shut it. So basically we just have the T flip-flop here. Both sides are powering the same one, and it's just retracting and pushing up our door here, in this case sand. So that's just one use of the T flip-flop that I found. There are lots of other uses, I just can't think of any right off the top of my head. Moving on, we're going to take a look at a pulse extender. Now what a pulse extender does is it takes pulse of like a button press, and it extends that pulse past the shutoff of the button itself. So this is useful for a piston door. If you have a pressure plate that you walk over and the pistons are shutting in your face, it could be handy to throw in a pulse extender to make sure that door stays open long enough for you to get through. Now, this is done by placing two comparators in alternating positions and putting redstone dust on either side of it. And what that does is it creates a decaying redstone signal, and you can increase the length of that decay by adding more comparators. Like I said, this is fairly handy for things like doors and such that you need a delay for like walking through. So yep, there are lots of other uses for this as well, but that's just kind of what came to the top of my head. Moving on, we have the pulse shortener. I think this is maybe called a monostable. No, it's not a monostable circuit. I don't know. It takes a long pulse and it turns it into a short pulse. That's what it does. I'm calling it a pulse shortener. Technical term, let me know down in the comments. I'm sure someone can point it out. If it is a monostable circuit, then great. If not, I'm an idiot, but you know, it works. So it works. This is really simple. Have a redstone running into a repeater, running into a block on top of a sticky piston. And what this does is it powers the piston pushing up the block, disconnecting the circuit to the output. But power gets through just briefly and you get a 1-tick pulse. This can also be applied with a lever and turning a constant power supply into a single pulse, like so. You could be saying, well, we can just use an observer for that. But the problem with that is, with the observer, it does have a 1-tick pulse, but it pulses twice. One when the power comes on and one when the power turns off. Although, with the addition of a lever, this can be turned into a 1-tick pulse when you toggle the lever from one direction, and it will also pulse when you toggle it the other direction, making it somewhat useful, but I don't know. I still like this design a little better with the button and the lever. But in certain circumstances, this one would also work. It's just a little more of a niche use, I think. Moving on, we have a variation of the circuit right over there where we shortened the pulse. And this one is for counting. So on this one over here, we have a series of 2 pistons and blocks and repeaters. And what this does is, if you watch the redstone lamp there, it'll power the lamp once. If we push it again, it will not power it again. And then on the second press, it will power it. So it's every second pulse that redstone lamp will light up. This one over here, we have basically the same thing, except for we have a sideways piston. And what this does is it powered the bulb once. We push it again, that's 2. Push it one more time, that's 3. And then it'll power. So it's every third. So it just went, so if it's 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And this is achieved just by a short delay on this sideways sticky piston. And these are helpful for things like a moss farm, for example. The moss farm that I have designed, it pushes the cobblestone or the stone from the stone generators into the middle 2 times. And on the second pass, the bone meal is fired and makes moss. And that way it doesn't waste as much bone meal. So these can be handy for things like that. Now this one over here is 3 in a row, and this one it'll fire 1, and then we'll go 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it'll be every 4th one. And this can be extended as long as you need it to get the pulse number that you need. Next thing we're going to take a look at are our clocks. This one over here is a very simple torch clock, and it's pretty fast. Just 3 redstone torches and some redstone dust going into blocks, and the signal just goes round and round and round and round, and you can run an output if you need from one of these. Now a variation of that is adding some repeaters. And then you can add some delay, and this will slow down your clock as needed to a rather specific amount, up to a certain length of time. Here's one with observers. If we break that real quick and we place an observer face to face with each other, it'll pulse really, really fast. And it's actually pulsing fast enough that this redstone lamp is not even shutting off. But if we had, say, a dropper, let's put her right there, facing up, and we throw a stack of redstone lamps in there, it's just going to spit those things out really fast. So put those back in there, and if we watch what happens when you push the observer in from a piston, I don't exactly know why this happens, but when you do this, it actually gets faster. So when you do that, it actually was going to spit them out even faster. Like I said, I really don't know the reason for that. It happens. So it happens. Moving on to another clock design. This one is the Etho hopper clock. And this is probably the most standard clock you're going to see on a lot of Redstone tutorials. I have seen it all over the internet numerous times. Basically what you're going to have is two hoppers facing into each other, comparators displaying what's inside each hopper, and if this side has items in it, it's going to power this block, which powers the redstone, which pushes the piston over. And this redstone block is going to in turn lock this hopper here. So all the items are going to drain into that hopper, and once they have all drained into that hopper, this comparator is going to shut off because there's no more contents in this hopper. We're going to see that in a second here. And then it allows this piston to go ahead and push the block back over to this side, and it just repeats from side to side. The Etho hopper clock can also be made in this orientation if you have height parameters that you need it to slide under. It's very small and can fit in most builds. Another thing we're going to take a look at here is the smart piston. Now, the smart piston, basically you have a redstone torch, redstone dust, powering this block, and when you place a block here, it conducts power from the torch to the redstone dust, and the piston automatically pushes it out. You can sit here and hold the button, and it will just fire as fast as it can move the blocks. I have a command block here just deleting the blocks so we don't have to run out of piston space, but really handy for piston feed tapes. Now, let's say you need to turn a corner on your piston feed tape. Well, the regular smart piston is not necessarily very good for that, because while yes, it will turn the corner, if you're not at your push limit here in the first line, it fills that one, and then if you go even further, it's going to end up breaking your redstone dust off of there, and yeah, no good. So one thing you can do to get around that is this design here. It's just an observer, facing that way, and then an observer facing this way into the piston. And what that does is it detects the block in front of it here, and it will fire the piston once. So you can see when we get the blocks over there, they just continually feed into the line, and there's nothing to break at the other end. You can just place an immovable block to keep it from running into whatever other build you have over here. All right, we're going to take a look at an auto unloader / item elevator here. Now, this is using a dropper into a soul sand bubble column. These have to be all full water sources with soul sand at the bottom. We'll create this lovely bubbling effect, and items will float along the top, and if I am not in fly mode, I will be bobbed to the top. And if you dispense items or drop items into the dropper, they will be shot out the bubble column via this clock here. All this is a comparator reading the contents of this dropper, powering this block, which powers this sticky piston, pushes the observer over here to its mate, creating the observer clock, like we talked about earlier, into a 2-tick pulse repeater back into the dropper, and it just creates a nice, easy item unloader / item elevator. One of the most popular redstone circuits that you're probably going to see and most people will use at some point is the item sorter. Now, this is the design by Impulse, and it comprises of 2 hoppers, some sort of chest or receptacle, a comparator, 3 redstone dust, and a repeater and a redstone torch. This can be stacked side by side because all the redstone is, it's a slice, it's stackable. I don't know the term for it exactly, but basically what happens here is you have an item that has a special name. You put 4 items in the last 4 slots of the top hopper. That gives out a signal strength of 1 from this comparator. And then you put, let's say, I think it's 21 items in here. And that gives out a signal strength of 2. We put 1 more item in there. Nope. 23, 24, 25. Okay. Guys, okay, there it goes. I can't remember how many it is. But basically what that does is once it reaches a certain number, it powers this last thing of redstone, which powers this block. The repeater picks that up, transmits it, shuts this torch off, which is powering this block. So in its dormant state, this torch is powering the block, which is locking the hopper here, which prevents it from sucking items out of this. 41 items, there you go. I always forget that. I don't use these that often. So let's say you wanted a large number of these side by side. You're going to build it up exactly like you do here and just place them side by side. The item filter with 4 items plus your filtered item here will never give off a signal strength of 4, which if it ever did give off a signal strength of 4, it would power the slice beside it. But with this setup, it never will. And the way you have the input, you just have a hopper line going across. Do not run these directly down. You have to run them across and have some sort of overflow chest over here. And we have redstone dust, repeater, torches, redstone blocks, and redstone repeaters here. So let's throw in some redstone dust, some repeaters. Let's grab half of everything out, some comparators, and we'll throw in that green terracotta and that glass. So if our system is working properly, we should have some redstone dust in this chest. Nothing in there because we did not put any torches. No, we didn't put any torches. Nothing in there because we did not put any redstone blocks. We got our 16 repeaters in there. And all the extra stuff goes into the overflow. Really handy. And the composters on top are simply to remove a little bit of lag component. The hoppers with nothing on top of them are constantly searching for items to fall in them. So if I were to queue an item, that would suck it up. But with the composter on top, that no longer has that functionality, and it will not suck up items from the top, and it just is looking at this one block for an output. And it's just a little bit less taxing on the game, causes less lag. A couple other circuits here that are handy to know are the AND gate or the NOR gate. So basically what the AND gate is you have to have an input to multiple sides, more than two or more. You can have as many as you want, but basically all the inputs have to be at the same time to get an output. The NOR gate is basically exact opposite of the AND gate, where you can have neither or just one, and it will produce an output. Both of these circuits are useful for any type of contraption that uses logic gates. For example, on the Pathfinder Saga SMP, I made a rock, paper, scissors minigame, and it used a lot of AND gates. So they are useful, though it's a little complicated to explain why or how. Last but not least, we're going to take a look at some double piston extenders. These are quite handy, and these are sticky pistons, and they retract, or they extend and they retract, including the block in the far end. Simple timing, like that. Now, this might not be the most useful version of this, but it gives you something to work off of. And then this one is with, those are sticky pistons and these are regular pistons, and these are specifically for gravity blocks, like our example of our door right over here. So that is kind of a showcase of two different things here. We have our T flip-flop for the opening and shutting, and we have our double piston extenders here on the bottom. I thought it might be an interesting way of showcasing kind of just what you can do with a couple of these different circuits. But that is going to wrap up what I thought of when it came to redstone circuits that everybody should know about. If I missed anything that you think should be in this video, go ahead and tell me down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys think are the must-know redstone circuits. Again, this is just my opinion. I am nowhere near a master of redstone, and I am very ready to be put in my place by people who know much more than I do about the subject. Because at the end of the day, I just have my personal experience to go off of. I did not look up anybody else's videos or lists for this. I just thought of it all on my own. And that was kind of the parameters of this challenge by MildlyAmused, aka the Completely Confused Dungeoneer. Link to his channels and stuff will be in the description below. Go check him out. He's doing this exact same video on his channel, but from his perspective. So that should be fun. And until next time, have a good day, everybody.